All right, folks, welcome to yet another Monday here at West Mecklenburg High School. Obviously, you guys are more than halfway through the day, but it's nice to see your faces after what felt like a pretty quick weekend. I don't know about you, but weekends have been flying by. I had a good birthday. Thank you. I appreciate you asking. It was pretty relaxed, so couldn't ask for much more. We are definitely in the final stretch now. I feel like with April, we've got 2 weeks left. Hi, Paris. And then after that, we'll only have about 3 weeks, but some of that is going to feel very interrupted because of testing and because of, I don't think you all will be on campus for some of those days. So we'll definitely figure it out, but it's going to start to accelerate until we hit the EOC. So we want to take as much time as possible to prepare for the EOC. So I'm going to start throwing some review questions at you all, kind of in random order. And then we will also make sure that we're playing more review games just to get you all thinking about some concepts we haven't talked about in quite some time. But of course, today we do have a warm up. It is Unit 8, Day 6. So I'm going to start the timer now. Please do make sure that you're doing the warm ups because I am starting to include more review questions there as well. And also, as a reminder, I do also pull them from the same source that I pull the test questions from, which means that if you're getting exposure to them in the warm-ups, then you'll feel probably a lot more confident going into the actual test because you're seeing some of the same questions. Okay, so check it out. 6 minutes to do Unit 8, Day 6 warm-up. Bless you. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Bless you. Bless you. All right. So today is April 19th, 2021. It is the 6th day of our 8th unit. I just want to remind you all that Monday is an opportunity. Yes, it does feel kind of like a reason to be more tired and a reason to want to be at home, but it's an opportunity to think about what you'd like to accomplish in the week. So I always think it's a good idea to take some time to be mindful, to meditate, to pray, whatever you do, just to be present in the moment at the beginning of the week and start to goal set. Think about what you'd like your life to look like at the end of the week. Think about what it will take to get you there. Who needs to be involved? Who does not need to be involved? Who do you actively need to avoid? What types of decisions will you need to make by the end of the week? And so even just having those mental ideas and cues will start to put you on the path towards achieving those goals. So Monday is an opportunity. It shouldn't be seen solely as a struggle, although it can be. Today is the 6th day of our 8th unit. We are going to discuss resistance to pathogens and also pathogenic resistance, which is kind of the opposite. But the objective today is to develop a cause and effect model for the role of disease agents in natural selection. And those disease agents are the pathogens that we talked about on Friday. And the essential question today is, what defenses, either natural or artificial, do organisms have against pathogens? Okay. Nobody has a notebook out except for Ashanti. We don't take paper, we don't write paper notes anymore, guys. We are also going to play nice Kahoot. I think that'll be fun for you. Okay, so what do you all already know about the immune system?
Help us to stay healthy.
Say that one more time, Lisa.
And help us to get make us stay healthy. So like every time we get like a shot, the immune system try to fight back the virus or anything.
Good. So yeah, they play a vital role in the maintenance of our health, and they help us to fight off um, pathogens that we talked about on Friday. Thank you. Anything else that we know about the immune system? We do offer an anatomy course here at Westmec. I'm not sure who will teach it next year. Right now, Mr. Reese teaches it upstairs, but the immune system is one of the chapters in that, or one of the units in that course. So if you're interested in this or in anything else related to human anatomy and physiology, definitely consider taking that course. But the immune system is an organisms, and again, we often talk about things from the human perspective, but other organisms, other animals also have their own immune systems. So an organism's internal network of special organs, cells, and chemicals that fight infection from pathogens. That's what an immune system is. So Lisa, you were basically spot on. So as with any other body system, the immune system involves several different organs and several different types of tissues and cells coordinating together, communicating with one another. So an immune response or an inflammatory response is not the sole job of any one organ or any one type of cell. It's a lot of different organs and cells working together and working with other systems as well. All right. So some of these organs, some of these organs include the oral cavity, so your mouth, your tonsils. Those organs are there as the primary line, the initial line of defense. They contain mucus that are able to catch different invaders, different pathogens as they try to enter your body. You've also got a nasal cavity that functions in much of the same way. In fact, they even have small hairs that are able to stop some pathogens from actually entering your lungs and your the back of your mouth, which is much more dry and it's a better environment for them. The thymus is an organ that you may not have ever heard of. And this is an interesting organ because it actually gets smaller over the course of a person's life. When you're a child, before you've built up some of the active immunity that we'll talk about later in this lesson, our bodies rely on this organ called the thymus to produce a lot of T cells, which are there to destroy any infected cells. So when you're a child, that organ is much larger. And then as you go throughout life and you start to pick up this active immunity because you've been exposed to different pathogens, that thymus actually shrinks, which is pretty interesting. And then we all have bone marrow as well. Bone marrow is where we produce white blood cells. So it's a vital part of our bodies. And it's kind of the spongy tissue that is found on the inside of our bones. You can actually donate bone marrow. It's a pretty painful process. So most people don't do it unless they absolutely have to for a family member, but it can be donated and then replenished a little bit. Bronchial tubes. Bronchial tubes are found inside of your lungs, and they play a vital role. They prevent the uptake of harmful chemicals and the process of gas exchange. Your intestines have what are called Peyer's patches, and these help to capture and destroy bacteria that you've ingested. So rather than having your bodies uptake that bacteria, and of course, we talked on Friday about the fact that we all have these microbiomes inside of our bodies that have a lot of bacteria. Some of them can be dangerous. So we've got these Peyer patches to capture and destroy those bacteria. Then you've got a spleen as well. The spleen is the largest organ of the immune system, believe it or not. And this is where white blood cells are stored, and they're used to fight various infections and diseases. So if you've ever heard of somebody going into septic shock or someone being septic, it's oftentimes a result of, or it can be a result of their spleen bursting, which is not good because all of the bacteria that is being fought inside of the spleen is then going to be released to other areas of the body, which can send your body into what is called septic shock, where basically there's just there's too much dirty stuff circulating throughout your body. And then lastly, hopefully you've heard of lymph nodes. And if you kind of like feel under your chin, kind of at the back of your jaw, you'll probably be able to feel one of your lymph nodes. But we've got lymph nodes really throughout our bodies. And when you're battling a cold, you'll actually feel those lymph nodes swell up because they're in hyperdrive. They're producing a lot more white blood cells. They're storing a lot more white blood cells. And they've got this lymph fluid, which is there to fight the infection throughout your body. So if you ever feel them swelling up, you might actually feel them before you feel the symptoms of the cold. So that's an interesting thing. And you can really, the primary place you can feel them is under your chin. Yeah, they can definitely hurt. Just because they're not supposed to, they're supposed to swell up. That's a natural physiological feature, but they're not supposed to get too big. And some people, you've heard of lymphoma, which is a specific type of cancer. That's when either all of your lymph nodes or some portion of your lymph nodes have become cancerous and they're swelling up to become too big. And that can be painful. And it's also a primary disease vector. So if you've got those lymph nodes, they kind of move throughout your body. And so if one of them becomes infected and becomes cancerous, then that cancer can spread to other parts of your body. Now, when you feel them, of course, you don't have cancer, I would assume. You're just feeling them because they're uncomfortably big, because you're probably just fighting off some type of infection. And then we also have different types of white blood cells, which is interesting. Now, you guys don't need to know this. I'm just telling you this out of pure intrigue. We've got monocytes. Monocytes are the cells that create what are called macrophages. And macrophages are these really big cells, that's why we call them macro, that are responsible for killing pathogens. They basically just engulf the pathogens and kind of use enzymes to break them down. Then we've got lymphocytes, which create what are called B cells and T cells and natural killer cells. And these are all different types of white blood cells that make antibodies, and they serve as specific defense mechanisms against tumors. We've got basophils, which are responsible for inflammatory reactions. So when you've got an allergic reaction taking place, and your eyes start to water, you start to feel your face getting puffier, you might even start to itch a little bit. That's the basophils that are kind of kicking in. So even those symptoms are uncomfortable, it's actually your body doing its job rather than letting the allergen kind of take over. It's your body kicking itself into hyperdrive. And then we've got neutrophils as well. These are the very first responders to a bacterial infection. And eosinophils, which are responsible for defending against parasites. We don't have that many eosinophils. We don't have all that many basophils. The majority of our white blood cells are monocytes, lymphocytes, and neutrophils. Okay, this you do need to write down. Excuse me. So antibodies. We've heard of antibodies before when we talked way back in Unit 1 about proteins. Antibodies are specific proteins that are made by leukocytes. That's the fancy word for white blood cells. And they are meant specifically to recognize and fight pathogens. So the way that antibodies work, or their special features, that pathogens, when they enter our body, all pathogens have a relatively unique antigen. And antigens are unique because of their shape. And that's something that we have returned to. That's a theme in biology. Shape determines function. So the various shapes, the various ways that substances are shaped determines what their job is. So in this case, we're looking at an antigen that has a triangular shape in some ways. The corresponding antibody is able to recognize the pathogen because of its antigen. That's a lot of words, right? But each antibody recognizes a specific antigen. So these antibodies kind of just move throughout our blood on a day, on a normal day in which you're not dealing with any infections. They don't really have much to do. But let's say you get infected by a cold that you've had before. There's some type of virus that has entered your body, and it's something that you've had in the past. You've already built up antibodies due to that virus that you've been infected with in the past. So those antibodies are going to immediately recognize the antigens that are present on the protein that is produced. And that allows your body to fight it off much more quickly. So antibodies play a very crucial role in the immune system. There are different types of immunity. So there's passive immunity, and then there's active immunity, and each one of those can be either natural or artificial. So passive immunity is when a person is given antibodies to a disease. That person can be given those antibodies via the mother's breast milk or via her placenta while they're still developing in utero. Or they can be given via an antibody containing blood product. So over the last year, you may have heard a lot about monoclonal antibodies. Monoclonal antibodies are delivered via blood transfusion. And in the case of COVID-19, they've helped a lot of people, including former President Donald Trump, get over their COVID-19 infection faster and in a healthier way than they may have otherwise been able to. You're essentially delivering the antibodies that have been produced by somebody else who already had the infection. And you're delivering those antibodies directly to a person who's currently dealing with them. The reason you would want to do this is because natural immunity takes time to build up. Active immunity takes time to build up. So if we deliver these antibodies to a person, they immediately have some type of protection. The downside is that it doesn't last very long. So in the case of COVID-19, these monoclonal antibodies are not going to be perfect, because even if they're taken from somebody who had the virus only 2 months ago, since then the virus has evolved and the virus's antigens have evolved slightly. So while the antibodies may be slightly effective, they won't be effective forever. So this type of passive immunity is really only effective for a short period of time. All right. And then there's also active immunity, which is developed as a result of exposure to a disease. You could be directly exposed via your infection, or you could be indirectly exposed via a vaccination. And that would be considered artificial active immunity. Now, with these vaccines, you're not actually being given, as we will discuss shortly, you're not actually being given the infection. You're being given, in most cases, in most vaccines, either a killed version of the bacteria or a weakened version of the virus that causes whatever disease it is. And again, this is why we have to get flu vaccines every year, because the flu evolves. The strain of the flu that we had that was circulating in the United States 5 years ago is not the same strain of the flu that is going to circulate later this year. And we know that there's H1N1. You may have heard of H1B1. There are many different versions of the flu. The Spanish influenza was the flu that caused the pandemic in 1918. So these are slightly different strains of the influenza virus. The benefits of active immunity are that it lasts for a long time. In some cases, it can even be lifelong. So you all, before you enter public schools, are required to get certain vaccines. And in some cases, those vaccines protect you for the entire span of your life, as is the case with the polio vaccine, for example. There are other vaccines, however, that last for a number of years, but not forever. We can think of the, shoot, it was just on the tip of my tongue. What's the vaccine that you get so that you cannot get, I can't remember. Or like if you get stabbed by a rusty nail, what is that called? I can't remember. Anyway, or the hepatitis vaccine, that's something that you typically have to get. Maybe you'll get it when you're 9 and then you get it again when you're 19. So some vaccines last for a while, but not forever. Tetanus, thank you, Dejan. Yeah, your tetanus shot, that's something that you typically have to get every three or so years. And of course, once you're an adult, you don't hear about people getting tetanus shots that often because they're not going to public schools. But for people who are working in environments where they might be exposed to tetanus as a result of, working around rust, then that is something that they need to consider doing more frequently. Okay, so based on what we just learned, which type of immunity does the COVID-19 vaccine provide? Is it natural or is it artificial? And is it passive or is it active? What do you all think? It isn't active. Yeah. And is it natural or artificial? It's artificial. Good. As all vaccines are, they are active in the sense that it provides you direct exposure to some aspects of the infection. You get infected in some way, but it's artificial in the sense that it's not a direct infection from the virus or from the bacteria itself. There are two types of COVID-19 vaccines that are currently being used. We might be soon developing a third type that I won't talk about today, but the first type that is currently being used is the mRNA vaccine. Both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are mRNA vaccines. We've heard about mRNA before. We know how mRNA works. But the mRNA, vaccine is going to insert instructions into the cells, and then that instructs the cells to make a harmless version of the protein, meaning that it cannot actually significantly hurt your body. Now, we are learning that some people do have some slight responses. You might have symptoms of a cold or of the flu for a day or so, as your body is, again, triggering that immune response. When you feel those symptoms, it's really a signal that your body is doing what it's supposed to do. Okay, so some people just have stronger responses because their bodies are kicking it into hyperdrive faster. And some people just might feel some soreness in their arm. We know that the Pfizer vaccine is 95% effective. But once our bodies make the protein, and again, it's harmless, it immediately is destroyed. And because of that, our white blood cells build up these antibodies. They remember how to fight the protein and the virus if it's ever encountered again. So that's how the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines work. The other type is the vector vaccine, and this is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So instead of providing the mRNA, vector vaccines actually provide small pieces of the protein itself. And so the cell will then assemble the protein, and from there they learn how to fight it. Same way, they build up the antibodies and they remember how to fight it going forward. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine has been slightly less effective than the Pfizer vaccine. And if you're paying attention, late last week, the CDC actually recommended that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine stop being distributed while they tried to figure out why there were 6 cases of people who had gotten blood clots after getting the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Now, that's like 0.0001% of all people who have gotten the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, but it was still enough to cause concern. So they stopped the distribution of this Johnson & Johnson vaccine. It's expected to be picked back up soon. Probably what happened is that those 6 people just semi-randomly ended up having blood clots, and it didn't have anything to do with the vaccine. But to be sure, they wanted to put a pause on it, do some further testing, and it'll probably soon be picked back up. All right. Nothing to write down here. We really already talked about this, but we know that antibiotics are being used too much. What happens is that if I use an antibiotic and it's 99% effective the first time, what that means is that 1% of the bacteria are going to live. That might not sound like a bad thing. If I've got a colony of 1 million bacteria and only 1% of them survive, that's only 10,000. So that's not that many. But those 10,000 are going to continue to reproduce. And eventually they'll build themselves back up to a colony of, again, 1 million bacteria. So now I've got to use another antibiotic, perhaps a stronger one. And this time it might only be 75% effective. So now I've got 25% of the colony that's still alive. That's 250,000 bacteria. Again, they built themselves back up to 1 million. Now I've got to use a stronger antibiotic. This time it might only be 50% effective. So what we're seeing, and this is natural selection at work, is bacteria that are kind of outpacing the development of our antibiotics. They're becoming resistant. We're being successful in killing off the majority of the bacteria, but some of them, however, are strong enough to survive the onslaught of our antibiotic use. So this is a huge threat to global health, to food security, and we'll talk more about this. It's leading to MRSA, which is methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. This is the same thing that causes a staph infection that we talked about on Friday. You might get from a locker room. At this time, it's actually resistant to this specific type of antibiotic, which makes it obviously much harder to get rid of. Same thing, gonorrhea is an STD. It is a bacterial disease. Typically, we can get rid of it pretty easily. We can cure it. We can treat it pretty easily. Unfortunately, because of the overuse of antibiotics, we're developing drug-resistant gonorrhea, which is obviously not a good thing. As with many other aspects of our society, I guess, most of the damage that is being done is affecting disproportionately poor countries. In the past, we may have called these countries third world countries. We may have also called them developing countries. Today, the term that we like to use is global South countries. And that just recognizes that these are the countries that have been disproportionately harmed by European imperialism, disproportionately harmed by some of the Soviet Union's policies as well. So these are countries in South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, Southern Asia, Southeast Asia, and Indonesia. But we see that in these places, resistance is a big, big problem. Large portions of the drugs that are being used are not actually killing the bacteria. The reason for this is that these countries are also huge parts of their economy is farm animals, farm labor, and also, farm animals for food. Unfortunately, that means that you've got to use a lot of bacteria to keep those, or a lot of antibiotics to keep those farm animals healthy. Using all those antibiotics, again, is through natural selection, creating these resistant bugs. And this is not a good thing, not only for the animals, but for the humans too, because if those bacteria eventually cross over, which they often do, to humans, then we won't have any defenses against them. So this is something that we need to be very careful with going forward. All right. Same thing is happening with pests. It's very simple. It's natural selection. You kill off most of them the first time. The next time, it's not going to be as many. The next time, it's even fewer. Because natural selection is literally choosing the organisms that are genetically capable of surviving this onslaught. And then they pass on those genes so their offspring can also survive. All right, let's play Kahoot. All right. So if you go to www.kahoot.it and enter the game code 5595196, you'll be able to join. Thank you, Tayshawn. Thank you, Ashanti and Adina. I'm gonna wait like 10 more seconds. All right. What does the term evolution mean? Good. So one of you chose survival of the fittest. I would say that's not a bad answer, but that really characterizes natural selection more so than evolution. With evolution, we want to think about a change taking place not in an individual, but across a species, and that change takes place over a long period of time. So not one generation to the next, but over the course of several generations. What does this image of homologous structures indicate about humans, seals, and whales? Good. We want to focus on homologous structures, meaning that they are similar structures. The picture showed that they've got very similar bones in their limbs. And this indicates that somewhere way, way, way in the distant past, there's probably a shared ancestor. Good job, Lance. Click on the trigger. Which of the following is the best way to describe the theory of natural selection? Yeah, so this is the phrase survival of the fittest, basically. We want to think about the organisms that have the best fit to their environment and that therefore are most suited to survive and reproduce. Which of the following are considered a pathogen? Good, they all are. We discussed that on Friday. So whoever answered the fastest got the most points. Antibodies are classified as which type of organic compound? literally just wrote this, right? Hopefully, if you were awake in writing. Yeah. Antibodies are proteins. Okay, so additional question. As proteins, what is their monomer? Should be very easy. Pretty sure I asked the same question Friday. What's the monomer of a protein? An amino acid. Good. I'll stop there for now so we can keep going. Which of the following best explains why bacteria are becoming resistant to antibiotics? Correct. Natural selection, yeah. Selecting those that are able to survive and reproduce. Good job, Araceli. 5 points separating the top two. DNA found in the nucleus is in the shape of. Yeah, the double helix. The double helix. Single helix would describe what? What is shaped like a RNA? Thank you, Lance. RNA is in the shape of a single helix. And then what's the relevance of a nucleotide? Why is that there? Good. The nucleotides are the monomers of DNA. So DNA is made up of nucleotides. Good job, Lisa. Big jump. Which of the following cells were the first cells on Earth? I skipped this lesson this year, but I will tell you the answer is organisms that do not have a nucleus and that have to eat their food. They don't make their own food. They don't have a nucleus and they have to go find and eat their food. And they do so without oxygen. Good. All right. So anaerobic, of course, means without oxygen. So I tried to give you that hint. Heterotrophic describes organisms that do not make their own food. They have to go find it. And then prokaryotes are organisms that do not have nuclei, or cells that do not have nuclei. Okay, this is related to that last question. Which gas was not present until autotrophic prokaryotes evolved? So I'll tell you this. This is the gas that is produced from photosynthesis, produced by photosynthesis. Okay, good. Oxygen. So some of you said carbon dioxide. You need carbon dioxide to do photosynthesis, and then photosynthesis produces oxygen. So basically, the story here is that in the early Earth, there was a lot of carbon dioxide. However, unfortunately, there was very little oxygen. So those very early organisms that lived in the oceans, they were not able to do photosynthesis, which is why they were heterotrophic. It wasn't until the development of these autotrophic prokaryotes, which learned how to do photosynthesis, that oxygen began to fill up the atmosphere. So, yeah, that's where that comes from. Which of the following is considered to be abiotic? So you've got to know what abiotic means, obviously. Yeah, viruses are not living. The word abiotic means non-living. So viruses, like I said, they're basically just a little bit of genetic material inside of a protein. They're not actually considered alive. Which piece of biochemical evidence is the strongest? Yeah, DNA, when we can actually compare the DNA between two species to see how closely related they are, that's the strongest evidence of evolution and that they have some type of common ancestor. Okay, Abigail is pulling away. 5 questions left. If you found an organism, which biotech device would you use to identify it? Good. DNA fingerprinting. I'm not going to say much about that. Ooh, good job, Lance. 4 questions. During which phase of the cell cycle does DNA replication occur? It's on the whiteboard for those of you who are in class right now. Good. Synthesis, the S stage, that takes place during the interphase portion of the cell cycle, and that's when the DNA is actually copied, which is why we use the word replication. Okay, so we've got some movement at the top here. Let's see. Which organelle is found in plant cells but not animal cells? Should be very quick. Good. Chloroplasts. And what is the role of a chloroplast in a plant cell? Yeah, chloroplasts are responsible for photosynthesis. What's the role of mitochondria? Mitochondria, and what's that process called, producing ATP? Respiration, good. What about ribosomes? What do ribosomes do in the cell? Good, they make proteins, excellent. And then the cell membrane, we know, it controls what comes in and goes out. Good job, all right. 2 questions left. What is the overview of protein synthesis? What are the correct steps here? Good. So we start off with DNA, which is the instruction manual inside of the nucleus. That DNA is going to be transcribed into another message called mRNA. mRNA is going to leave the nucleus and go to the ribosomes that Abina was just talking about, where it will be translated into an amino acid sequence. Those amino acids are the building blocks of protein, so they fold into a big protein. Good job. All right, last question. Which type of organic compound is broken down by the mitochondria to provide cell energy? Yeah, good. Carbs. So glucose is broken down, and glucose is indeed a carbohydrate. Let's see where we finished up. 13 out of 16. Excellent job at home, Lisa. Excellent job, 13 out of 16, Lance, and almost perfect, one away from perfection. Abigail. Okay, we've got one more. Let's do a, what's it called? Quiz. Oh, I didn't know how to do this. Let's try this. All right, so joinmyquiz.com, 317562. Okay, I'm gonna wait like 30 seconds for folks to join. We've got 15 minutes left in class. All right. Space with who? think there are only 2 questions left. Let's see. All right, let's see. Oh, maybe that wasn't the last question. There are 3 more? Oh. Oh, Vance is in the lead. Uh-oh, struggle with that one. Yes. Good. Okay, I'm not sure who won. Did you win, Lance? Oh, there it is. You did. Congratulations. All right, let's take a look at these questions. Okay. I didn't explicitly define speciation, but well, actually, yeah, I did. Speciation is the development of one species into 2 distinct species, often caused by geographic isolation or some other separation, maybe over competition. So I think the answer to both of these should have been, let's see, can I click on it? That one, speciation. Of course, the finches show how a single bird species developed into several different species because of their different food, their different preferences for foods. And then this is also speciation, yeah. All right, so I sent out a remind message. I think it's scheduled to go out at 5 o'clock tonight, just to remind you all to take a look at your notes, as tomorrow is test day. The test tomorrow will be 50 questions. So it's the longest test we've taken so far. Of course, we're getting closer and closer to that EOC length of 65 questions. All of your assignments will also be due at 11:59 tomorrow. So don't forget about the warm-ups and exit tickets. There is an exit ticket today, but you guys are packing up. So you'll just have to remind yourself to do it at some point between now and tomorrow at 11:59. And then make sure you take some time this evening, even if it's just 15, 20, 30 minutes to go over your notes. That can go a long way. Not just your notes from Unit 8, but remember, all of our tests are cumulative. So if you can remind yourself to go over your notes from previous units, just to get a refresher, there are some terms that I think will quickly come back to you as long as you just kind of glance over them. That can go a long way so that you're not paralyzed tomorrow, like, oh, it's on the tip of my tongue, but I cannot remember what a Punnett square is, or I can't remember what prokaryotic means. Okay, so do those things. I think you guys will be in a good place tomorrow. And then Wednesday is the PACT. So I won't see you all on Wednesday. I might see some of you if I'm proctoring your exam, but we won't have class on Wednesday. And then we'll start Unit 9 Thursday. So the focus is on tomorrow's test. It's important because we only have a few more. And they are really your best opportunities to improve your grades. They are formal. They are worth 100 points. I don't want you all banking on any potential extra credit. I don't want you banking on any portfolio assignments or anything. Your opportunity to improve your grade is through these tests. Okay, so take them seriously. Make sure you're studying. If you have help, I want to just praise Abina really quickly, if I can do that, Abina, because she reached out to me and she was like, hey, Mr. Rudd, I want to go over some concepts. And she came during Hawk Time, and we had a good time for about 30 minutes just going over some concepts that we hadn't talked about in a while, and I think it was really effective. So that opportunity is always there for you all to come hang out during Hawk Time, and we can go over some things. Or if you prefer not to do it during school, we can schedule an appointment before or after school. Okay, so let's make sure we're taking or making use of that option. Thank you for doing that, Abina. Other than that, I will talk to you all tomorrow. Stop recording.